Weidenhammer is the founder and owner and president of Weidenhammer Systems Incorporated. And if you've lived in this Reading area for any length of time, you'll know that name. John's very much involved in the entire community. Weidenhammer is a leading firm with a national footprint in information technology software applications, custom application software, and information technology consulting, and is a provider and manager of computer infrastructure. John, as you'll hear, is a native of Reading. He's a Lehigh University graduate. He and his wife reside here in Wyomissing. John was just this morning at Conrad Weiser High School, where he presented to a nice number of students there, about 40 students, on this same topic related to entrepreneurship and information technology and the burgeoning elements thereof. Following John's presentation here, he'll be speaking for about 40 minutes. As is our custom, there's a card at your table. Use a $20 bill and write it on if you want. You may or may not get it back. If you have any questions. And one of the Albright College students will be going around and collecting them, and then we'll entertain those questions. And I know John is willing to also stay a bit afterward if you'd like to talk to him directly. So John, thank you for being with us, and welcome. And
I'm going to turn this screen around a little bit so I can see it while I'm wandering. Way to plug it back in for me. So good afternoon, everybody. I am absolutely delighted to be here with you this afternoon. And just know that I'm a technology guy, so much of what I talk about and sort of my view of the world comes to you through a technology lens. But I also like to think of myself as an entrepreneur, and when Saul asked me to be the presenter today, he asked me to talk about the impact that entrepreneurs have in sort of this global world where things are accelerating at a very fast pace and where the world is getting smaller all the time. And thanks to our friends at Comcast, they're helping with that. They're helping through the interconnectedness that we have in the world to help people that otherwise are very disadvantaged in terms of their access to information and commerce and so forth, be enabled. And I'll talk about that a little bit as I go through my presentation. So I like to start a presentation by creating a little context about what I'm gonna talk about, some of the things I'm gonna refer to. And I apologize to the people in the way back there if my slides have print that's too small. I'll try to amplify everything. Also, if anybody wants a copy of these slides, I'm happy to share them with you. If you just give me a card here at the front of the room, or send me an email or something. My email is pretty easy. It's JPW, my initials, John Paul Weidenhammer, @hammer.net. So send me an email there, and I'll send you the presentation. I'm going to submit to all of you that we are, right now, in this moment in time, at an inflection point that mankind has never seen or experienced. And the impact of that is changing many of the things that we have learned or taught to be true in the past, and used as the things that we interpret to predict what's going to happen in the future. So what is an inflection point? Probably everybody here knows what it is, but I thought I defined it. It's a time of significant change. It's a turning point. It's a tipping point. It's a point at which things go from the way they always were to the way they're going to be different in the future. And we're there now, right now, at this time. So, what's causing it? It's really the confluence of many technologies that I'll talk about in a minute, but what's happening is the pace of change is accelerating at a blinding rate. And that's very disconcerting to us as human beings, because many of the things that we rely on are shifting around us as we go forward. I think that from a technology perspective, again, I'm a technology guy, but whatever industry you're in, everything that happened before now was just getting us ready, just laying the foundation for the things that are going to happen. I said to the kids in Conrad Weiser today, my grandparents, my mother's parents, and my mother grew up in Host, Pennsylvania. I don't know if anybody knows where that is, but Host, Pennsylvania is just a little bit north of Womelsdorf. There's a little one-room schoolhouse. My mother went to school there on the right side of the road as you go up toward 778. And when I was a very young kid, my grandparents lived with my family. And I love to talk to my grandpa, and he was born in 1884. And I would say to him, "Grandpa, what was the most exciting time in your life?" And he'd say, "Right now. Right now is the most exciting." And I'd say, "How could it be? I mean, you grew up at a time when people moved around on horses, and you saw the invention of electricity and the car and the airplane and radio and television and world wars. And you think now's the most exciting time?" Yep, right now is the most exciting time in my life. And as a kid, I was mesmerized by that notion. But for us, even some of us old cats with the gray hair, now is the time of significant change, and it's different now than it's been in the past. Because decisions are becoming more difficult for all of us, and the time loop within which we need to make decisions is changing. To get things done, we need to decide today and figure things out very, very quickly, because the window of opportunity will close if you can't decide quickly. It's not like the old days when you could procrastinate, and sometimes procrastination, as you know, is very rewarding because you don't deal with something and it goes away. And you think, "Yeah, took care of that problem. Everything's great." But time loops are shortening, and we need to make decisions quickly. This is one of the reasons that artificial intelligence is becoming so important, because it monitors things constantly and gives us the feedback that we need to make earlier decisions. But I ask you to just think about the staggering confluence of emerging technologies. Things like artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing. In fact, at Conrad Weiser, and who knew? Who knew that the students at Conrad Weiser are printing tissue, living tissue, with 3D printers? Who knew? They think that in time, they're going to figure out how to print with a 3D printer a heart. Not a plastic heart, a tissue heart. It's crazy, crazy stuff. Nanotechnology, biotechnology, material science, energy, genetics, the re-engineering of the human genome. It's going to be possible, it's probably possible today, to literally make designer children. If you wanted a child with blonde hair, a certain height, certain build, certain characteristics, I'm not advocating for this. I'm just saying that we have the technology today with CRISPR-Cas9 and very fine editing capability of the genome to do that kind of thing. It's staggering. But all of these things coming together create a foundation for the change I'm going to talk about. And entrepreneurs are at the heart of this. So who's ever heard of the hype cycle? Anybody heard of it? Just one or two? Well, what the hype cycle is it says that there is a trigger point for every technology, where technology sort of becomes an idea, and it's about to become mainstream. And everybody starts talking about a technology. And then you get to this peak of exaggerated or inflated expectations, where everybody's talking about how this technology is going to change the world, and it's going to be so great, and the results are going to be outsized. And then invariably, it's followed by a trough of disillusionment, because the technology doesn't really evolve and deliver the results that people expected at the outside and at that peak of inflated expectations. And then you get to this plateau of productivity. And the point I want to make is people typically think of the hype cycle with the plateau of productivity being at a lower point from an interest and a capability standpoint than where we were at the peak of inflated expectations. But my experience is different. My experience is that new technologies, and I've been a technology guy my whole life, so I'm 70. So I've been working nearly 50 years, and always in the technology industry. And my experience is that almost always, technologies tend to over-deliver on initial expectations. And I want to tell you a story about that. Mike McCarthy's back there. Mike McCarthy used to run a group called Leadership Berks. Anybody been through that or heard of it? Okay, Leadership Berks. So Mike invited me on a number of occasions, and I got fired after this presentation, by the way. Mike invited me on a number of occasions to come and talk about how nonprofits use technology, because these folks in Leadership Berks, the goal of Leadership Berks was to prepare folks for a role in a nonprofit on a nonprofit board. So this is 2002. We had just gone through the Y2K, which was literally the largest non-event of my life. I remember at when Y2K happened, we had 100% of the Weidenhammer team come to the office at like 10 o'clock on January 31st, because we were going to be ready for all the bad things that were going to happen. Even though we thought we were really prepared, we wanted to be available. So the clock turned over, we waited for the phones to start ringing, the emails to start coming in, nothing. So about 6 o'clock in the morning, I started sending people home. 10 o'clock, I sent some more people home. Around noon, I got a call from a reporter from the Eagle. And he said, "You got to tell me everything that's going on. What's breaking? Is the world coming to an end?" And I said, I think globally we did a good job. I watched the clock roll all day as we hit 12, rolling across the globe. Seems like certain small things are happening, and we had clients with some very small things. But I said, I don't have anything to tell you. So he said, "So what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm reviewing my email and I'm deleting old email." So as you can imagine, the headline in the paper on January 2nd was, "Local technology executive spends Y2K deleting emails." So it wasn't the publicity I was looking for. But at this Leadership Berks event, 2002, I made the statement, "The internet changes everything." And this group had an almost violent knee-jerk reaction. They called me a charlatan. They said that I was a technology guy that was overhyping his book, that Y2K and the dot-com bust had proven, without a doubt, that technology was not worth the investment and that the internet was just nothing. Well, looking back now from 2019, I think it would be hard for any of us to say that the internet didn't change everything. It changes the way we find information, the way we shop, the way we communicate with each other, the way we consume information, even the way we're entertained. So the internet's only one example of how technology over my lifetime has been a game changer. So I'm here to talk about entrepreneurs and the global impact that entrepreneurs have. These are just some of the faces of really great entrepreneurs globally that have changed the way the world works. But I have to tell you, entrepreneurs are hard to spot. You can't always tell who they are. Some of these are old guys, and they go back even to the beginning of the last century. But they're not all old men, that I think I heard somebody say. In fact, I was at a seminar not too long ago, and I'm blanking on his name right now. Who was the guy that founded Lotus 123 and sold it to IBM? Mitch Kapoor. Okay, somebody whispered it, I think, in the back. He's dedicated his life and his fortune to changing the look of Silicon Valley. Right now, Silicon Valley is largely white men and Asian men. And his goal is to bring minorities and females into the technology industry, and we really need to do that. But you know, entrepreneurship doesn't have those barriers. It doesn't have barriers of race or ethnicity or age or sexual orientation or any of that. Anybody can be an entrepreneur. Everybody in this room can be if you've got the right stuff. But entrepreneurs across the world are making a difference because they're innovating. They're creating jobs, in some cases from nothing. They're succeeding. They're transforming roles for women and minorities and young people. There are literally teenagers today that are millionaires because they invented a game or they invented an app that gets sold in the Apple iTunes store or on Google Play. So it can transform things, and it's entrepreneurs are enabling people who thought they had no opportunity, that grew up believing that there was no opportunity available to them, even in remote areas of the world. It's allowing them to have different expectations, to get outside of their caste, to get outside of the social structure that they're in. It's powerful. It's a tremendous enabler of people of all ages and all types. I just thought I'd define entrepreneur because, you know, I think everybody gets what it's about, but it's a person or people who organize and operate a business or businesses taking on greater than normal financial risk in order to do so. So what are some of the characteristics of these people? They're seeking financial independence. They're driving to create, to make something where there maybe was nothing in the past. They have a need to turn their dreams into reality, to seize change and create opportunity, and to be disruptors. There's the folks that stand out today are the ones that are disrupting old ideas and old business models. From the perspective of, you know, my life in business, I've really always enjoyed working with and for people that are trying to make something new and different. I said to the kids at Conrad Weiser, and I was surprised because they were like 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. I said, "How many of you remember Blockbuster?" And most of them did, frankly. Most of them could remember Blockbuster. You know, all those old Blockbuster stores are either a CVS or a Walgreens. but it used to be that when you wanted to rent a video, you went and got your VHS tape or beta, or later you got your CD from the video store, and you brought it home, and you had it sit around for a while, and you thought your wife was going to take it back, and she didn't, and you'd yell at her because there'd be late fees when you took it back. And we just accepted that model. And then Netflix came along, and Netflix said, well, let's cut that drive out. Let's enable you to order over the internet, order a video content. We'll send it to you. You use it for as long as you want, and when you're done with it, send it back, and we'll send you another one. And little by little, they kind of disrupted the model of the video store. In fact, once we got enough broadband access, thanks to people like Comcast and others, you didn't even need to have that physical media anymore. You could just download at your convenience in real time the content that you wanted to watch and use it. So a big industry, video rental stores, was completely disrupted by an idea that came out of nowhere. And this is happening all the time. So disruption is at the heart of this. But traits of entrepreneurs are they have passion, they believe in themselves, they have a high level of self-motivation, they have the courage to take a risk, and they also have a high tolerance for risk and ambiguity. Those of you that possess these traits, entrepreneurship may be in your future. But you know, entrepreneurs don't always succeed. I looked at some data from the Small Business Administration, and they said that most business startups, not most, 34% fail within 2 years. And that within 5 years, 50% of them fail. My personal observation is that the failure rate is much, much higher than these numbers because frankly, the SBA only funds businesses that have a pretty good chance of making it. I believe that 95% of startups fail within the first 5 years. So it's a real nail-biter ride, you know, for the first 5 years. And I think about when Weidenhammer got started in 1978, my whole life revolved around making payroll every 2 weeks. That's all I thought about. Are we going to have enough money to be able to pay people 2 weeks when it comes to that period of time? And I'm proud to say that we never, ever missed a payroll in the history of our company. So we're one of the lucky ones, but not everybody's able to do that. Today, it's almost a necessity that entrepreneurs think globally, that they act globally, because of how connected the world is, but also how interconnected the markets are to which their products and services can be provided. And there are defensive aspects of being an entrepreneur. You need to spread your risk out a little bit, but there's also offensive aspects of going out and finding markets that are not tapped by others, sourcing your resources, your people, your product, your supply chain globally, and finding opportunities that really exist in pockets of the world that many entrepreneurs and many people never really think about. There are some required competencies. You've got to be able to articulate your purpose. You need to build alliances, again, because of the connected world that we have. You need to establish well your supply chain, which even small companies can have a global supply chain. Do yourself a favor, go on Alibaba when you get home tonight, and think about buying the most obscure thing. And if you're willing to buy 1,000 of them, there's somebody out there that'll supply it for you. And even if you want to buy one, the price might be high, but you can find the craziest stuff there because it's a world market. And because there's consolidation going on in the world, where the big companies are getting bigger, smaller companies are being acquired, entrepreneurs need to figure out how they're going to interact with the very large multinational companies. Not for the purpose of being acquired, but for the purpose of playing in their ecosystem. So let's look at a profile of one entrepreneur. Guess who? Me. I'll say I've always been an entrepreneur since when I was very, very little. This is where I grew up, that White House in the middle there. We called it a row home when I was a kid. I guess I could call it a townhouse. Feels sort of like feels like an upgrade. I also feel like that White House looked better when I lived there, but probably looked the same. My grandparents lived on the second floor. My parents and my 2 brothers lived in 2 bedrooms on the 3rd floor of that house. Cold in the winter, very hot in the summer, no air conditioning. But we had a very loving family and I had a very happy childhood. I was a saver. I tried to save something every day, even if it was just a penny. And I literally had a Cub Scout bank just like that I put my money into. And when it started to get full, I would take it to the savings bank. And remember those of you that had a passbook savings account, and you take your $3.53 and you hand it over, and if it was the right time of the month, they'd include your deposit, maybe you'd get 3 or 4 cents worth of interest that they put in your passbook. Well, I was a saver. And I also was the kind of guy that had a lemonade stand, or I sold things door to door. One of my most successful products was I had a line of little plastic signs that you could print anything on, up to 25 characters. And people would often put their home address, the address of their home, or their name, and screw it to their front door, or tape it to their front door. I was really successful with that. But the job that helped me most at being an entrepreneur was that I was a Reading Times paperboy. Back in the way back, Reading had 2 newspapers. They had the Times in the morning, they had the Eagle in the afternoon. Times was Monday to Saturday, the Eagle was 7 days a week. Fortunately, I was a Times carrier, and I got Sundays off. But when you're a paperboy, you're a sole proprietor. There's no backup. There's no other employees. There's no pulling the covers back over your head and saying, I don't feel like getting out of bed today. The papers show up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You got to get your tail out of bed, get down there and pass your papers. And if you're late, your customers are waiting on the front porch wanting to know why their paper is late. Because they have things to do too. They want to have their paper at breakfast. They want to go to work. The neat thing about being a paperboy, in addition to being a sole proprietor, was that I had to pay my paper bill at the circulation office on Court Street, in the 300 block of Court Street every Saturday. So I'd take the bus downtown. I think it cost 15 cents to ride the bus. I'd take the bus downtown with my money. Probably we wouldn't allow kids to take $100 by themselves downtown today. But I would take my money downtown, I'd pay my bill, and I would reward myself by going to the Marvel Ranch every Saturday. And I'd have a cheeseburger and a basket of onion rings. And then I'd walk around town. Yeah, it was probably, I did that whole thing probably for $1. You go to Shirelli Brothers, or you go up to Kagan's and look at the sporting goods stuff. And my favorite place to go was the George D. Barbie Company, which at that time was located at 2nd and Penn Street. And it sold electronic stuff. And I was involved in ham radio back then, amateur radio, and you could buy really neat stuff there. I went all through the Reading schools, and in fact, in 12th grade, I got elected to be the president of the senior class at Reading High. And I don't know if anybody went to Reading High, but there was a teacher there, a guy named Joe Plank. And Joe Plank was an English teacher, a great guy. He became absolutely a great friend of mine. He used to hold court at a luncheonette called Screpsi's, right across the street. And we'd go over there after school and to bits with him. In fact, one day in a conversation I had, I shouldn't admit this, but I had a conversation with Joe Plank, and he said, I'm trying to get somebody to write an essay for the Lions essay contest, and nobody will do it. And I said, it's too bad. And he said, but you're going to do it. And I said, why would I do that? He said, because if you do it, he said, I will give you, this was in the first semester of my senior year, he said, I will give you all A's for the rest of the year. Now he got my attention. So I stayed home from school one day, and I wrote this essay, and I gave it to him as a draft. And he read it, and he wrote at the top of it, and I still have this will win. And it did. So I wrote an essay called Peace is Attainable. I literally still have it, and I have his writing on the draft. But the thing about me being the president of the senior class was, when I got elected, he said to me, you know, John, your election to be the president of the senior class of Reading High School is the triumph of politics over mentality. I never forgot that. And I think probably a lot of people can relate to that in the current political situation. So off to Lehigh University. I learned a lot at Lehigh. Lehigh, when I showed up in the fall of 1967, Lehigh had just gotten a computer donated to them by a company called Control Data that's no longer around. It was a CDC 6400 computer, a 64-bit computer. You know, we talk about 64-bit computing being something that's new, and really 64-bit computing goes all the way back to that. And they taught all the engineers at Lehigh programming in Fortran and systems analysis and design, such as the state-of-the-art was back then, which really wasn't very advanced. And then they wove computing into the curriculum as we learned to be engineers. And I learned two important things at Lehigh, I always say. One was, I didn't want to be an engineer, and I did want to be a guy that worked with information systems, and basically that's what I've done for the rest of my life. So out of college, worked for Carpenter, on-the-bench programmer, worked up through the chairs, left there after a couple of years and went to work for a company called Ernst & Young, traveled all over the world doing different kinds of engagements, many of them related to information systems, technology, computers, but not everything that we did. But one of my clients was this guy, Severin Fairman. For those of you who don't know Severin, he became a good friend of mine. Severin was a Holocaust survivor. Some of you know that during the Second World War, the Nazis rounded up everybody that they didn't like, not just Jews, but anybody they didn't like for any reason, and they put them in concentration camps, and almost nobody survived that internment. But Severin did, and he was sent when he was 12 years old. And he would say that a large part of the reason why he survived was he could speak English. And many of the German officers wanted to know English because they could see where the war was going to end, and they wanted to be able to speak English because they figured the Allies were going to win again, and like they did in the First World War, and they wanted to be able to speak intelligently to these folks. But Severin, when I first worked with him, his business wasn't doing well. He made letterbox plates and chain door fasteners and kick plates and was being tortured by foreign competition. And I can remember walking through his plant with him one day, and I said, you know, Severin, if you're going to continue to be in business, you're going to have to take some of the quality out of your product, or you're never going to be able to compete with all these foreign competitors. And he said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said, John, I would rather go out of business than make an inferior quality product. He said, I just couldn't do that. We're going to have to find another way. And his other way was, he rounded up a bunch of guys from the old Reading hardware company. If you go into the city of Reading, most of the locks on the front doors have Reading hardware on them somewhere. And he decided to start making these mortise locks. And I can remember when Baldwin first started making mortise locks, they were like Swiss watchmakers. They sat at these benches and they would put the parts in the lock and they'd take them out and file them a little bit, put the parts back in and file them, and they'd activate the lock to make sure it worked. They were literally making these locks by hand. And ultimately they got into high volume production. But what really made Baldwin stand out was that they were willing to make the trim for a lock in any finish, and you could have a different finish on the front door and the inside of the door. Now you think, well, how many finishes are there? There's polished brass, and there's antique brass, and there's nickel and chrome, and you know, that's not that big of a deal. Well, there are 155 different U.S. metal finishes that are available that you can specify. And Baldwin would make any one of those finishes on the front door and the inside, on the outside of the door, the inside of the door, and that really distinguished them to designers and really launched their business. So, in 1977, Severin came to me and he said, you know, my IT manager has left me. I need somebody like you to come to work for me. Would you consider coming to work at Baldwin and being your IT manager? I said, you know, Severin, it's interesting that you would present this opportunity to me because I was thinking that I would start a business and you would be my first customer. And he said, so that's great. So you're looking to make a change, so come to work for me. I said, well, how about if we try this? How about if I come to you and I work for you 40 hours a week, but they can be any 40 hours in the week, because he worked literally 7 days a week. They can be any 40 hours of the week, and then I can spend the rest of the time starting this consultancy that I want to start. So he agreed to that, and we agreed to a 6-month trial period of doing that. So during that 6 months, I was able to get Weidenhammer started, had a couple of employees. After 6 months, it became obvious to both of us that I was heading in a different direction, and he hired somebody. But that was the start of Weidenhammer, and Severin agreed to pay me the whopping sum of $17 an hour for my 40 hours a week. And that was a lot less than I was making when I worked for Ernst & Young. So Weidenhammer was started in February 15th of 1978. We've been in business 50 years. I'm going to accelerate my presentation here. We've been in business 40 years. Sorry, I misspoke.